Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Clea on our line. Clea, how are you?
Hi, Michael. I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I don't believe that you and I will debate on this, but we might. I'm not sure. You do a lot of work in this space, so why don't you share a little bit about you, and we'll dive into the conversation.
Sure. Well, Michael, I'm the CEO of Intelligence Squared US. We're the nation's only nonpartisan, nonprofit debate organization. So what that means is we're a media company. We bring both sides together of any kind of issue that could be technology, science, law, public affairs, current affairs, foreign policy, something that's unfolding in the public square. And that's kind of a point of division. We bring both sides together and we have a debate about that question. We have a few different formats that we produce these in. We started out in this very formal Oxford style debate, and the audience would come live and vote. And during COVID, our business was disrupted. We really actually expanded and produced a lot more content for podcasts, radio programs, virtual streaming, television. And now we're a weekly show that you can listen on your NPR station in your local market and access everything online. So I really kind of consider us to be a destination, the go-to destination to hear two sides of an issue.
And that is something that is so desperately needed, and not to mock the other media outlets, but they tend to be very one-sided. They weren't always that way. When cable television and cable news first came out, you'd have leaning one way or leaning another way, but there was still some, seeking to understand the other points of view. But it just seems, especially with social media taking fold, it's just everything seems to be very far one way or the other, and no real dialogue. It's just been accusations and finger pointing and not getting down to, let's talk about what the differences are. And I know you know this, I know this as well. There's a lot more in common with all of us than there are differences. But unfortunately, we don't get to hear and see that a lot when we're consuming media in a variety of different ways.
I mean, that's true. That's what we're really working toward. It's one of the reasons we structured this as a nonprofit organization, because this is also very much an educational initiative, introducing people to a critical thinking process and a model for disagreeing in a healthy and productive way. And so debate can be used in many different sorts of applications. What we're doing, of course, is curating content. So we work with conferences, events, media companies, and we put together a really dynamic, exchange of ideas. And then we distribute that broadly to the public and to educational outlets, because we think that this model, the idea that you can come together with somebody you really disagree with, doesn't have to be made personal. It doesn't have to get toxic. It doesn't have to be disrespectful or devolve into ad hominem attacks. This could really be a way that we synthesize ideas and that we get more information to make better decisions.
One thing that I've noticed, especially when you bring people together that you think wouldn't get along, or they're completely different opinions on some things, I see I don't know how long it's been, but the friendship between former presidents Clinton and George W. Bush. Now, if you would have told me 20 years ago that these two individuals would be friends, I would go, okay, on what universe? They seem to be complete opposites, but they obviously have different political opinions on things, but they enjoy spending time together. And that's something that I think we all should long for. I feel horrible that society is the way it is today, that friendships and relationships end because someone has a different point of view on a particular subject or political platform or whatnot. And it tears me up thinking about that, because we can all have all of these ideas, come together, debate, and discuss why this is important. Because whenever I have a disagreement with somebody, I seek to understand, why is that your viewpoint? But not in a condemnation type of way, but more in a curiosity. Why? And then they share the reasons why, and it brings awareness. It educates me. Could it sway my viewpoint on it? Potentially, but at least it gives me a better understanding why they are passionate about that particular matter, whether it's my wife or it's friends or someone across the table at a coffee shop, whatever the case may be, instead of, okay, why do you feel that? And if they articulate it in such a way where it looks like that they've done some research on it, besides just, catching a news clip, that tells me, okay, they are invested in this. They want to learn about this. So that's when I take the time and go, well, let's educate me on this. Let's see if I learn something new on that. And I think that's gone because of social media and 10-second sound bites and 140 characters or 280, whatever Twitter is now, real short things. And I think that's where our consumption has been driven to, and those longer, let's get to the bottom of this and have a conversation about things seems to have been lost in the shuffle of all of this.
Well, I think you brought up a good point. A lot of people react to issues now with feelings and really heightened emotions. And that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of these issues are dealing with questions of human rights, equality, justice. Even these issues, we can sit down and with a structured format and with an emphasis on being informed, using evidence and fact-based research, kind of elevate from I feel this way to I think this way because. And I think that that's where debate takes a more analytical approach. Doesn't mean that you take any emotion out of it at all. I mean, in fact, personal anecdotes are possibly some of the most compelling arguments you'll ever hear in a debate. And it's part of the art of persuasion. But right, it is, I think you're right in terms of, social media. Look, these are really big, complex, loaded ideas, and everything that we're dealing with, from like climate change to gender equity, to, the impending recession, what's happening in our country in terms of economics and global economics, with, everything that we're looking at with, say, the supply chain, to an era of geopolitical instability. And these aren't questions or topics that you're really going to get an in-depth understanding of in 140 characters or reading one news source. So debate is able to say, hey, we have this question about, the dominance of China in the coming century, or with the global supply chain, and whether the positive and negative impacts of globalization, or the war in Ukraine. How should we be responding to this? Just to fire off tweets or read a couple articles, it's really not enough to understand the why something's happening and then the how we could actually fix it. So that's what our media company's all about.
It's great work. And as you were talking about this, one of the things that I encounter a lot in the work that I'm doing and the conferences and whatnot that I speak at is, now that we have entered the next stage of the pandemic, debatable on post-pandemic or not, really depends on who you talk to and their feelings on it. But where they live. I mean, I'm based in New York City, and there's just, when you're in an area of extreme density, I think there's different concerns versus if you're, somewhere where there's a rural, much more open air lifestyle. So, I get the concerns from both sides. I do too. And, where I split my time between Toronto and San Diego. Toronto, not as dense, although there are pockets in Toronto that are much like Manhattan and other parts of New York City that are really close quarters, but there's other parts where it's a little more wide open. And if I see somebody wearing a mask, I'm not giving them any grief. I don't know their situation. They may be, really, fighting something or dealing with cancer or who knows what. I don't know. So I don't judge people. I do my best. Humans, we judge. It's our brains programmed to tell us here's this and this, but I don't judge people on whether or not they want to wear a mask. I just make sure that I take the precautions that I need to do to make myself healthy. And I think that's the best for everybody. But one thing that came to mind while you're talking is, now that we're in whatever stage the pandemic that we're in and people are starting to go back into the office, there's that debate of in office or working remotely all the time or hybrid kind of approach. And there seems to be, in a lot of the stats and companies I talk to, there seems to be a divide where some employees are saying, wait a minute, I've been working remotely for 2 years. My productivity is actually higher than it was before. Why do I have to go back to my cubicle and drink that lousy coffee? I'm getting the work done here. And employers are like, no, we need you here. So if there was ever an arena for proper debate, the working remotely versus in office debate is something that is desperately needed for a lot of organizations because they're not having those conversations. They're just saying it's going to be this or this without any real dialogue or input. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, this is a debate I'd really like to bring to the stage, or the show, I should say now, if we're not recording it live. I think somebody like Adam Grant is publishing a lot of really great insights about this. And I bring up Adam because we just produced a podcast with him. He wrote a book called Think Again, which is an exploration of checking your bias, trying to understand how other people are thinking, and also how to debate really in a constructive way. And he thinks the same thing. I mean, this is something that we're seeing in terms of the debate about back to work post-pandemic. I would love to consult him and somebody on the other side and bring that conversation together. If I was going to give you my personal opinion, as the head of a small media operation, but there are definitely advantages to having the team together. There is a return to in-person experiences, and we have traditionally been a live debate platform. So going to events and having these, unscripted, dynamic conversations where two people disagree about something is kind of what we do. So it's not realistic for us to have a policy that's, we're going to do all of these remote forever, because something's lost in that transfer of energy and ideas of the in-person forum and in-person experience. But that said, I mean, there's definitely, in terms of commute times and based on what market you're in, there's very good arguments to be made that, certain positions don't need to be in the office all the time, that, you could come up with a hybrid model that works for everybody. What we arrived at here, we took a, poll from the team and discovered people like both. They really like seeing their colleagues. We get a ton of stuff done faster in person. Having decision making, bringing everybody together, you just get a different creative, energy and transfer of ideas. But that doesn't mean that there's, by any stretch of the imagination, a rule that you can't work from home, or that even the policy isn't flexible. So what we've kind of arrived at together in this organization is we're in the office, for those of us that are in New York, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then working from home Monday and Friday. And there's flexibility even in those 3 days because we travel. So just in the last 6 months, we put on a debate in Brussels at the Brussels Forum on, Russian isolationism. We put on a debate in Chicago for this convening of food scientists and talking about the future of food. We have a debate, or now we've had 2 events in Washington, D.C. And we have folks remote. I have people in DC, in Scottsdale, Arizona. They're traveling in for these events. So what I learned in terms of having balance for your team is you want everybody to perform at their best. Your job as a leader is to build a team that's exceptional and to play to everybody's strengths so that they're performing at their best. And if you have dynamics in that team and you already have people working remotely, which chances are you do now, then you need to have a policy, or not even that. That word is, for some people, that's an allergy, but a strategy in place that you're all working toward goals, and how you get there is kind of adapts and reflects the goals. And I think that you get to a much more balanced place. We're all trying to get to a summit. We're trying to bring the smartest, most informed, best debates that you'll ever see to the world. We're all working toward that goal. We have a lot of integrity and points of integrity and editorial guidelines that we're following, and new production initiatives and live experiences that we're building. And I found the majority of that can be done remotely because we've honed our ability, and we're a small team. So we're nimble. But there's just something that you're going to lose if you don't bring your people together. It's bonding, it's mentoring, it's really a team dynamic that you can be so strong remotely.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. I spoke at a insurance event last month, and organization that during the pandemic basically doubled in size. So they actually brought their entire team together for the first time since the pandemic started. So there were people that were meeting each other physically in person for the first time. And it was, everyone had this sense of happiness and relief. A couple people were a little apprehensive, and I understand that because it may have been the first time that they've been in a group of that size. So, like we talked about before, it's just understanding and respecting other people's viewpoints. But for me, it was like, okay, there's a lot to be said about the in-person. If I had to pick, I'd say hybrid, but what makes sense for your customers, don't forget them, because they need it, and and harmonize it with the team and have it be agile so it can adjust accordingly. But again, as you were talking, it reminded me of something that when I was in the hotel, I just came back from a conference earlier this week, and I was in the hotel before going to the event, and I had it on one of the news stations, and they had 2 guests, that were on screen, and they were from different sides of a political race, and I forget what state it was. And they were, getting pretty heated with each other. And I'm thinking to myself, if these 2 people were in the same room, would the temperature be the same? And I thought that even before, thinking about our conversation today. And the answer to this. For my sense, it wouldn't be the same, because it seems like that many times the camera and being distant seems to, I don't know, the politeness kind of goes away a little bit, or just the heat of the moment kind of thing. Because if you're having a debate with somebody, but they're literally in the same room with you, there's still that human connection where it's like, you're a human being. You have, loves, desires, things, dreams, aspirations, and you want the best for that person, even if they're completely different ballpark of something. If you're in the room, it's a different temperature than if it's across the screen. That's just my sense with all of that. So again, not trying to sway people one way or the other on remote work versus in person, but I agree with you wholeheartedly on there's a dynamic about the in person that has not been yet replicated in this virtual world. I don't know if it ever will be, but
I don't think it can be, honestly. I don't think you can replicate it. And I think it comes down to one thing, and that's trust. Because to your point, if you're in person and you're having, say, an argument or a disagreement, or you need to clear some issues, doing that on Zoom is actually really impersonal versus being in person, reading somebody's body language, reading the crowd if it's an event, being able to connect, have a conversation that's not curated, in front of a screen. It's just so limited to me. So I think we all went into survival mode. We did amazing things this way. We learned lessons that we can continue to apply in the future. But I don't think you can really build trust in a team without having that human connection in a relationship. That's how we build relationships. So, I mean, a lot of our team joined during COVID as well. We did quite a bit of growing into a weekly radio show. And it was really amazing to see people come together for the first time. And we had this bond of we all survived this way. And now, we actually get to celebrate, the relationships that we have built, and they just get a lot stronger. So I think it's essential. I think it's essential to building a team, a successful company. But I think there should absolutely still be flexibility because you want the best out of your team.
Yeah, I agree. And surviving the pandemic has created in many organizations, especially like yours, that grew during that time, a band of brothers and sisters. It's like, look what we accomplished when the odds were against us. Now we are here together. Hold on, watch what we can do now. And that's where I see happening with your organization, especially as I think society is getting tired of the social media punches in the face kind of mentality and more of a let's have a dialogue and have a conversation about these very important matters and get to some resolution on some things that people can live with, and we can move on and grow instead of being restricted because we're constantly arguing with each other.
And maybe you don't come to a resolution. I mean, sometimes you can still disagree. You learned something if you were listening. And, perhaps that reinforces your point of view, or you have a reason now to think a different way. But, either way, I'm hopeful that our program and the work that we're doing is elevating the conversation, because you can only get so deep. You're only scratching the surface of these things in social media. You're getting pretty sensationalized headlines. You're getting the cult of personality served up, through all these individual Twitter feeds. And how do you parse through this just deluge of information that we all get on a daily basis to understand, what are the facts that we can actually agree on? That's a different conversation for maybe another podcast, but there are actually facts on both sides of issues. And that evidence should inform the conversation and help frame what are very complicated issues. And for us to actually have a deeper understanding of them, we do need to listen to deeper conversations. We call it long format in the media world versus, the Twitter sphere of your, now expanded 140 characters. But ultimately, those aren't in-depth debates, and that's really not where decisions are made or policy is, decided on. Those things do happen through relationships, deeper understanding, and being able to come to a consensus. So, I think social media has probably been pretty destructive to having in-depth conversations or building an in-depth understanding. Sometimes it isn't easy to decipher what's real and what's not. And there needs to be a lot of work done around there. And there is, from news organizations and really interesting startups that are working to combat, say, misinformation, and confusing stuff that gets out there. But what we believe is that you really need to sit down, spend some time learning and digging deep about an issue, and then hear to serious thinkers or very experienced voices on both sides of that issue to understand it.
It's all about education, my friend. So it always goes back to that. So Clea, I love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you, your show, and everything else you're doing?
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely. It's Intelligence Squared US. We are on every major podcast distributor, so Spotify or Apple or Google or wherever you get your podcasts. Our tile is white. You'll see it. We're often, go by IQ2 or just Intelligence Squared US. You'll be able to visit our website as well, IQ2us.org, intelligencesquaredus.org.
I'll definitely have all that information in the show notes. So, Clea, thank you again for this very, very important work. The world needs it, and I'm so thankful that you were able to spend some time with me today. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.